let's talk about interpreting unison figures, band figures on the drums. So, chances are you've been playing a while, working on your playing technique and your reading, and then you come up against this kind of thing in a piece. And it's not at all obvious at first what to do with this sort of thing. The first thing I'm going to say, I get straight from the Dave Hassel book, The Graded Course, great books if you haven't already got them, which is that this kind of thing, which we call a unison figure or a band figure, is provided as information for the drummer. In other words, it tells you what the band or some of the band are playing at that moment. So in my little example, which you'll hear in a bit, the brass play this little line. Now, it's up to you whether to do anything with it or what to do with it. And a very valid way of treating this is to acknowledge it and not use it in your playing. So in other words, you would carry on keeping time through that section and just be aware that the brass is playing this figure on top. It can help with your reading because when it'll reassure you that you are where you think you are in the music, because you can see these figures come and go. Okay, so that is a very important thing, and it can sometimes be a very wise musical choice not to catch all the figures on the drums. Yeah. At other times, it's the worst thing you can do. So, context is key. Make sure you understand the notation in terms of how the rhythm works out. So, you might need to go back to basics. If I see something like this, I would need to firstly know where these notes line up in time. Now, my example here is swung. So the beat is counted as a long short, so I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. Lots of these principles I talk about apply in straight time as well. I thought I'd pick a swing one because there's a special case that we might need to, which we will cover. Alright, but anyway, so counting wise, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now my convention with this is to put all the counts in and then bracket off the counts where there's not a note. So we're left with 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Then I would spend some time just listening to the track and just check in and go, okay, does my understanding of this rhythm really tally with what I can hear? Can I pick out the instrument or instruments that are playing this rhythm at that moment in the music and really latch on to their sound? So yeah, like I said, this is a brass figure, very common thing, but it may as well be piano or something else, absolutely anything at all. You won't always get you won't always be told who's playing this. I think this kind of thing is very, very useful. It's a great idea in rehearsals. If you've got an unspecified rhythm and you have the time and you've got a pencil with you, mark them in. And then the next time you come round, you'll just have a little bit more of a clue of, oh yeah, that's a trumpet thing that I've got to catch here. And this will ultimately influence the choice of drums and cymbals that you use to play along with these rhythms. Something else you might get, I've seen this quite a lot in big band writing, you might get the notes with added articulations and even dynamics as they appear on the brass parts. So for instance in this one you might get something like, yeah, I'm left myself enough room. You might get some accents and other articulation marks, and that would definitely influence what I play at these moments. Okay, great. So that is kind of level one. Here's an example of me playing time while the brass do their thing and me not getting in their way at all. the second level of interpreting these figures, I'm going to keep time, and I'm going to incorporate the rhythm of the figure. And to start with, I'm just going to do it lightly on the snare drum. This is a very good thing to do, especially if you're not confident with it but you want to play along. And maybe if you're sight reading with a band, you want to play that figure. At this point, I might throw in the question: why do we put these in at all? And this can boil down to helping the band out. The sound of your drums can blend with the other band members, or at least it should do if you're doing your job right. And in a big band setting, this is the context that I'm most familiar with, so apologies if I go to that all the time. Playing the figures on the snare drum along with the trumpet section will give them some confidence that they are placing the notes right, and when everyone gets it in the same place, it's really strong and it really benefits the music. So that's why we're doing it. So here's me playing time and adding in the band figure on the snare drum. Another skill you'll want to develop is exactly the same idea, but using the bass drum instead of the snare drum. Getting slightly more complicated, we now want to think about the idea of foreground and background. Or in other words, you can think of this like negative space, or playing the gaps. So if we think about the counts where there isn't a note, the 1, the 2, the and the 4, those are like our background space with the figure as the foreground. So what I'm going to do now, and this is again a common way to interpret the figures, is I'm going to play the rhythm on the snare drum, and I'm going to play bass drum in the gaps, in the backgrounds. Here we go. Here's the notation for that last one. You might find, especially if you're a strong reader, that it helps you to think through the process if you write these out. So yeah, grab a pencil and paper, or use a bit of software if you like to work like that, and get it all on paper. Sometimes it can really help, especially if you're struggling with the coordination side of things. You can see exactly what needs to line up with what, while you're developing the ability to do these things on the fly. For the third method of interpretation, I'm going to stop playing normal time when I get to the bar with the figure in, and I'm going to play the figure itself using cymbal and bass drum together. And I'm going to do these to start with all on the right cymbal. And then in the gaps, I'm going to lightly play on the snare drum. You could use the tom as well instead of the snare drum. Snare's nice because it's just there, and it's a very transparent sound in relation to the toms. Toms being pitched means they can sometimes get in the way of the other instruments. Snare drum less so, especially if you don't whack it. So right cymbal and bass drum on the figure, light snare in the gaps. Because we're in swing time, we're essentially dividing each beat into 3 parts. So we can play all 3 essentially triplets. So I've written it down already here. This is the same kind of system as before: ride and bass on the beat, on the figure, and snare drum in the gaps, but using the triplets as the grid rather than the swung eighth notes or the swung quavers. So now I'm thinking 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, or 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a, if you're used to that. Here's how this one sounds. Those are all of the kind of entry-level interpretations, ways that I would suggest you work through, and you'll build up a repertoire of things to use when you encounter these figures in your pieces. Obviously there's a huge amount more that you can do with these, and a brilliant thing to do would be go through some recordings featuring drummers that you like and find good examples of how they play figures along with the band and how they're using the drums to do this. I'm not going to get into the specifics of some of the more advanced systems in this video. I might well do another one in which I do. Just as a little teaser here, I'm going to end with a couple of examples of me playing other interpretations, other ways of using the drums, and notice that these give a slightly more soloistic flavour. These are probably not the things to pull out if you're just rattling through a tune and you kind of want to stay in the background. These are the sorts of things that make you go, hey, look at all these drums, which can be a very good thing, obviously in the right place. And developing your sense of where's the right place to use these it's an ongoing it's an ongoing process in most drummers' minds, and it's definitely something to weigh up the balance. Hopefully, if you're recording your playing and listening back, if you try these things out on a gig, listen back and go, did I overshoot the mark there? That's the kind of thing you want to be asking yourself. So, like I said, I'm going to end with a couple of slightly more soloistic interpretations.